The Walt Disney Company is in a very odd situation, one that perhaps they could have never seen their fortunes coming to. What I'm talking about is the problem that the Walt Disney Company may not even have a single film this year turn a profit. Not a single one. There is a scenario in which every single Disney film loses money, and that is becoming more and more likely with every single day. We'll explain why right now. All right, folks, and welcome back to another fascinating video here on the WDW Pro channel. We just celebrated 20,000 subscribers yesterday, and we are already closing in on 21,000 subscribers. If you'd like to become one, click down below if we earn that click. Folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and stick it to the algorithms when you click it. Again, it's the notification bell. Joining me to chat about Disney's woes is Tom Connors. Welcome back, Tom.
Greetings. How you doing?
Now, Tom, I believe you've got a special effect going on there. Maybe a hand.
Oh, sorry about that. There we go.
There you go. There you go.
All right.
Well, Tom, we're talking about the situation Disney has. We're also going to be examining the questions that members have sent in, but let's dive in, starting with this Hollywood Reporter article. It says, Elemental team on Pixar films returning to theaters. It's disappointing when people watch them on iPhones. This by Kirsten Chuba. But I have bad news for the folks at Pixar. It may be that they will only be putting their stuff out on phones in the future, considering how poorly this one is anticipated to do. This says Pixar's latest film, Elemental, exploring a city where fire, water, land, and air residents live together as a romance blossoms between fiery young woman Ember and water guy Wade, represents much more than a fictional story to several of its cast and creators. Alongside the romance at the center of the story is the journey of a fire family, the parents of which immigrated from their native fireland to start a better life for their daughter in Element City. It was one of the film's leading themes, says its director. The guiding light that got me through all this was just this idea of appreciating the people in our lives and sacrifice something and risked, Peter Sohn told The Hollywood Reporter at the film's Los Angeles premiere on Thursday. For me, those people are my parents. They were immigrants from another world, and they came here with nothing and built a life for my brother and I. Now, it goes on to talk about how this is essentially an immigrant story. The problem here is that it also deals with, again, the idea of immigrants facing challenges and not being accepted. And, well, it feels very much Zootopia-esque. The other problem, Tom, that this film faces is that it has been said that it is now looking at Strange World level failure. In other words, this is a film with a $200 million price tag on production, and it is aiming to make far less than it needs to turn a profit. So, Tom, what's going on with Disney and Pixar?
Well, they've had a Pixar problem now ever since they ousted John Lasseter, and frankly, this just looks like a company trying to make a Pixar movie more than a Pixar film. So, a carbon copy of a carbon copy of a carbon copy kind of thing.
Well, it's derivative for sure.
Right. In so many ways, this had zero buzz going into this year. I've seen the trailer a few times in theaters. No murmurs even at the end of the trailer. No laughing or celebration. It just looks like a dud. It looks like so many other things we've seen before, hodgepodge together. Right. And I haven't seen a lot of advertising, so I almost got to imagine they probably took a lot of the advertising budget for this and put it into Indiana Jones and Guardians of the Galaxy or Little Mermaid or something. Decision. But yeah. Stephen,
you're just joining us. We're talking about the fact that Disney may not have a single profitable film in 2023. No, folks, that's not a joke. It's not a parody. It's not pastiche. It is reality. So let's run through it, Stephen, together. You've got Ant-Man Quantumania, flop. You've got Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3. That's the one shot they have now, we believe, to break even. Little Mermaid, a flop. Elemental, on track to be a flop. Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, on track to be a huge, colossal flop. The Marvels, tracking to be a flop. Wish, well, we'll talk about Wish soon, folks, because that's one where they had a chance, and they're screwing it already. Stephen, how long can we go How long can we possibly go with Disney failing at the box office before this becomes a real issue that the media is ready to talk about rather than just us?
I think we're already seeing the cusp of that when it came to Indiana Jones and the whole lifting the embargo early. I think that was a big mistake. I think Elemental will highlight it. When Indiana Jones does come out fully, you're going to see all the critics and probably mainstream come at it a lot harsher. I think people are at the point now, especially even mainstream news, where you can't protect these failing properties. So it's coming.
Stephen, have you found it funny? And Tom, I want your take on this as well. I have found it laughable that the media wants to say that The Little Mermaid failed because of skin color. They don't want to say anything about the skin color of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse because it's the exact same skin color, essentially, and drastically different results. They want to play this the way they want to play it, when they want to play it, but they don't want to apply it universally. They don't want to be principled. They just want to use it as a propagandizing tool. What do you guys think?
I mean, I guess going off of what you're saying there, I guess, yeah, I can't disagree with that. It's pretty obvious at this point. They have used it for just about every property they can where they can apply it. And Elemental in and of itself kind of almost feels like another one of those propaganda tools. It may not on the surface level, but once you start breaking it down, you can start to pick away at certain things that are clearly there for that reason too. And it's across the board. Like you said, the only one that it isn't a big part of is Guardians of the Galaxy. And how ironic that that's the only one that probably has a chance of getting any kind of profit this year. It's pretty much close to breaking even, but it's got
close.
a little bit
there's a debate there. Valiant says it will not break even. I say that it will, but
it's crawling on 800 million right now. So it's in the video last I heard is not coming out till August. So that tells me Disney's going to let it ride in theaters for the next couple months.
Well, why would they not? It's their one chance.
Right, exactly. So at this point, that's the one thing they've got that might make a profit. Elemental looks like just more of the same crap we've gotten out of the studio, only, just like Strange World and everything else we've gotten out of them lately. Just, it's a dud. It's a dud. Absolutely. I think it's DOA. I think even the $40 million projections for its opening weekend are too high.
Well, that's really saying something because this is a Pixar film. There was a time when Pixar films, you could count on them being contenders for $1 billion.
If it makes more than 25, amazing. If it makes more than 25 million, I'll be surprised.
My gosh. I mean, it's just, and you've got that back to back, Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny will come out later. Now it is tracking at 60 million for its opening, which is horrendous. And then I think it's going to drop down to 50. I mean, I don't know. Stephen, any thoughts on this before we hop into the cues for members?
See, I'm not very good on the financials part, but looking at the trailer itself, I feel like it's just a rehash, dumbed down version of Inside Out. Instead of dealing with all the emotions,
exactly,
you're rehashing it in fire and water. That's what it feels like. And if the story comes out the same, I don't have any hopes, and that's the biggest thing. I don't have hopes. I have to wait till I see it now. That's where I'm at.
Zootopia is what if animals had feelings. This is what if elements had feelings. WALL-E was what if robots have feelings. You had what if feelings had feelings. With Inside Out, and I think it's just tired. WALL-E was a stroke of genius. Inside Out was fine. It's really good, but now they've played the trope until the trope is tired.
There is one thing I want to add, and I've noticed it more and more, is that with the fire characters in general, it feels like they took a big hint or even nod to taking away Billy Crystal's flame character from Howl's Moving Castle, and it looks almost very similar.
I had not thought of that. You make a great point. All right, let's get into the cues from our members. This is one of the perks of being a member at the Tier 2 and above levels. You get to send in your questions, and these questions are so often so awesome. So here we go. From NT Phantom, we have loved the recent Splash Mountain travesty video. You really knocked it out of the park. By the way, Phantom, there's a new one coming out Monday. Be on the lookout. You're not going to believe it. Sort of like Disney's been knocking favorite attractions out of the parks for years now, like Lorena. I was disgusted with the change to Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I also detest the changes to Pirates of the Caribbean and other rides that were altered for content. Now, it cuts off here, but it says it's Hall of Presidents. And I'm going to assume, Phantom, that you were going to ask, are there changes coming for the Hall of Presidents? And I can tell you that depends on elections. I don't want to go into why that has to do with elections, but let's just say that Disney has become very polarized, very contentious. And if certain people were to win an election, well, I don't know that Disney would put an animatronic back up in the front. And I'm not even sure that if a particular political party were to win at this point, that Disney would be ready to put an animatronic back in the front. Guys, do you think it's time perhaps for Disney just to retire these attractions that at one time people could get behind because we all sort of supported the idea of the presidency? It seems like it's so polarized now, it's hard to do so. What do you guys think?
I don't agree with that. I think history should be taught in a manner that can be not only educational, but in a way that it doesn't become overbearing. I don't think anyone should change it. They should just adapt it to how the generation perceives things. We're heading into a technological era where more people are staring at a screen, so start making it more interactive with their phones, like an augmented reality, not wipe it out and just give a similar kind of like history lesson where it's dumbed down.
Agreed on that. All right, let's go to a member chat from Michelle C. Michelle says, okay, people always say you have to hit rock bottom before change can happen. How much farther down can Disney go before they redirect and go back to what we want, or are they just down and out for good? Tom, Disney was at the top for, let's say, 10 to 12 years, right? But it was not always that way. Now, they were at the top usually for family animated entertainment, but they sort of became this new thing once Iger brought in Pixar, Marvel, etc. Now we're sliding back down off of that. I'm not sure if it's because of hubris or what it is, but how far do you think Disney can drop before change is inevitable?
Well, I mean, as you said, they've had a history of ebbing and flowing, I guess, as far as their popularity and significance in pop culture. I mean, even within the last 30 years, you had the 80s, which were fairly decent to them, at least the latter part for the most part. And then the 90s were great for them. The early 2000s seemed to be well. That was the era that you were just referring to. They were kind of coming out of, because it was in that 2000s era, the mid 2000s to late 2000s, where they picked up Pixar and Marvel and finally Star Wars. And yeah, frankly, they're just kind of it's hard to compare to the other times previously, because this is the first time where it's built upon other properties outside of, you can make an argument that Pixar kind of always has been associated with Disney, I guess. But even that, as we just said, before, is a pale comparison to what it used to be. So frankly, I don't know how low they could go, but they could go pretty low. I mean, they could afford it to a point, but when will they start making changes, I guess, is the better question. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, so here's something that I've been thinking about, and I haven't asked this on a show yet or in a video, and I want to get your thoughts. I'm wondering, we're watching as these various companies come under fire in the month of June for reasons that we won't say in order to protect the channel, but everybody out there knows what we're talking about. I'm curious, was Disney the first and the media just did not cover it? We have watched them fall in the polling. We've covered that. We have watched their box office go off a cliff. We followed that. We've watched their subscribers crater. We followed that. But up until this alcoholic beverage company came under fire, nobody was really connecting the dots and being like, oh, there's a pushback against this movement. And I'm wondering if Disney was actually the catalyst, and nobody has really connected that quite yet. What do you guys think?
Disney has dominated for years as the kid brand, and now they're out of, the mainstream is kind of turned against them too, in a way, as far as the crowd anyway, not the media. But I don't know. That's a good question. What do you think, Steven?
About rock bottom, well, what you just said is they used to be about kids for kids, and now they're coming after kids, allegedly. And I think that's where the rock bottom is happening, because if you can't have a brand where parents feel safe with their kids, you no longer have a brand that is meant for kids. And no matter how many princesses or princes or mascots or anything you try to fill it up with and say, hey, look over here, look at this new shiny thing, it's for you. It's not the kids that have the final say, it's the parents. And if you can't win over the parents, you've already hit rock bottom.
Good point. And I'll tell you why I think that the trip to rock bottom started before these other companies, because I think that Lightyear and Strange World, whether you agree or disagree with the results, I think those did grave damage to the company. I think they were used as a cudgel to get rid of Chapek. but I think that the overall cost was far greater than the company considered, and so I don't know that there's coming back from this in the short term. I think Disney is gravely damaged. All right, great question, Michelle. Let's go to Descripto. Asks, what could be the major repercussions of the failure that seems to be Indiana Jones 5, aside from the obvious Kathleen Kennedy being fired rumors? We are talking about a much beloved character portrayed by one of Hollywood's best. I'm seeing now his 2 Jack Ryan films are quite good, and this may do much more damage than we can see coming. So, guys, let's answer the question. What is the fallout from the failure of Indiana Jones 5?
The death of Indy.
What was that?
The death of Indy. It's the death of another male role model. It's you still have the original 3 films, but it's showing that they can no longer deliver action heroes. They can't deliver anything that was set before. They can't.
It's kind of a third strike against Lucasfilm at the end of the day, because between Mandalorian season 3 being, DOA, you had
subscribers,
Andor,
hundreds of thousands of subscribers dropping in North America the same quarter.
One of the lowest watched shows
comes out.
Yeah, and even Andor being one of the lowest watched shows on the history of the platform,
and don't forget Willow.
I was just going to say Willow being
god awful,
unwatched and removed basically unceremoniously. I mean, this would be a very big final blow, I think, to Lucasfilm, because after this, what have they got left? Star Wars is hanging on by a thread at best. And we know this is the last indie film, but I mean, if this is if the film makes money, they'll find ways to milk the franchise, whether it be in an animated form, video games, what have you. But the way the projections are going, it doesn't look good for Disney on the Lucasfilm front, right?
I think this film will struggle to make $400 million, and it needs $1 billion
I think
to make
right.
a profit.
Yeah,
it's going to fade out.
Here's what I think, guys. I think that people were disgusted with the treatment of Luke Skywalker, and I think that they're going to do the same thing, or have done the same thing, with Indiana Jones. And I don't think, even in the mainstream, I don't think the normies are going to support another Jake Skywalker. And I think it is repulsing the audience. What do you guys think?
It is. We're at a point now where you're taking our memories, our shared traditions of films with our families, our friends, our loved ones, our lost ones, and you're now saying they're not good enough or they're no good. And you can't even show the respect of what got you there for wanting to buy these franchises. And then you're trying to rework them and say, hey, you should enjoy this now. But there's no enjoyment because the characters they're delivering, and I use that loosely, characters have no soul, they have no substance, and they have no story to tell, because it's most of the time just getting demeaned and saying, I can do this better than you. And that's not how life works. There's always going to be someone that does something better than you, but it doesn't mean you stop bettering yourself. Disney has lost that.
Well, with the Rey situation, she doesn't need to better herself in that story because she's already perfect.
And she can steal names.
Same with Fleabag. Yeah. All right, let's go to Tommy Tables. Tommy says, you've seen the latest rumors, I'm sure, but could Lucasfilm really be sold back to George, or is this a pixie dust pipe dream? All right, let me take this one. Tommy, I'm sure, sent this in before we did the big expose on why this is just essentially impossible. But here's the very shortened Cliff Notes. George Lucas is almost 80. He sold this so that he could get it away from himself and so that he could pass on his generational wealth to his children without it being tied to Star Wars. That would revert the situation. Also, whoever buys Star Wars would have to have an army, literally an army of attorneys, because of all the various contracts where Disney is not just a single company. It is composed of many, many companies, and those companies sell to one another. So, for example, Galaxy's Edge, the 2 Star Wars lands in Disneyland and Walt Disney World, they're owned, of course, by Disney Parks, and then the entities that are below Disney Parks in that chart of umbrella style companies. But then also all of the shows that are on Disney Plus, they belong to Disney Plus, and they also have contracts, convoluted contracts that feature all kinds of payments that go out to these various actors, writers, directors, etc., based on their performance. Now, George Lucas doesn't have a streaming platform, so he can't easily move it off of Disney Plus to another streaming platform, so that makes it very difficult for him. But even if it was a company that had a streaming platform, They would have to have a mountain of attorneys to navigate through each and every one of these shows because these shows were not written with terminating clauses in such a way that you can easily sell Star Wars. Although we think of Star Wars as one thing, in reality, it is thousands of different things and tens of thousands of contracts and negotiations, etc., all existing across a spectrum of companies inside Disney. It would be extraordinarily difficult. The final reason, though, that puts this nail in the coffin, Disney would have to sell Star Wars for an amount that would exceed the cost that Disney would incur to their stock value as investors were spooked by the selling of Star Wars. We estimate that would mean that Star Wars would have to sell far in excess of $3.75 billion, and that in spite of the fact that they likely could not sell theme park rights because they already have theme park assets, therefore decreasing the value of the brand in total. Hope we explained it.
May I
Yes.
ask something quickly? I think there was one contract that we also need to highlight with those contracts you're mentioning, and that's the contracts between the customers and them. They've broken that numerous times.
Oh, yes. Well, and they've diminished the value of the brand. So selling it would probably mean that they sell it for less than they bought it, and then that damages the stock because investors who aren't paying much attention will be spooked.
That's a whole nother thing. Yeah, like I was going to bring up is, we would all love in a perfect world, but let's just say that you don't even have to deal with all the red tape and stuff that you just brought up. Pro, I think you hit the nail on the head with the fact that selling it to anybody would be a problem. Whether even George himself he wanted to sell it to Disney in the first place, even way back when, just because it's Lucasfilm as a whole is such a huge undertaking, right? He's getting up there. He was ready to retire. None of his kids at that time were interested in taking it on, obviously. So he felt that Disney was one of the few places that could handle it and foster it and treat it right. That being said, where we're sitting now, like the only way anybody else is going to get their hands on Lucasfilm, the only way Disney is not by getting it from Disney, but buying Disney most likely. And that, of course, is a whole nother conversation to be had. It's an interesting rumor. It's a fun rumor to kind of debate about and discuss. But at the end of the day, George Lucas himself has moved on. I mean, I really don't think he would want to take this all under his wings again, frankly.
And to put it further to bed, were George Lucas to buy it, he would essentially have to buy a Lucasfilm that has been crafted by Kathleen Kennedy to hate everything he did. He would have to fire 90% of the employees and start completely over again. At 80, I don't think that's something he's interested in doing.
Mm-mm.
Great question, though. Space Dave 2000 says, how much longer can Disney Parks revenue sustain the entire company? Seems there's been some awful lack of forward thinking on Disney's part. And the answer, Space Dave, is we're at that point already where the parks are diminishing in their revenue. That's what we anticipate to see in Q3 and Q4. Although we are not providing financial advice, please seek out financial advice from a qualified, competent, and certified individual you trust in your area. But watch for that. Q3 and Q4 we anticipate will not be good for the parks. Darth Apathy says, how can Disney get the actual money they need for Comcast? Talking about Hulu, I'm assuming. If Star Wars and Lucasfilm are off the table, if foreign parks aren't really an option, and they're not, what can they do? Does making a profit on paper even matter when what's needed is liquid capital? Well, Tom, I'm going to hand this to you. Tell me about the potential for Disney to sell parts of Fox.
Well, that one makes a little bit more sense. See, because Fox, I mean, we could almost argue it's probably been a bigger snafu of Bob's than the whole Star Wars thing. That was $70 billion they just basically dumped down the drain because they haven't done anything with it of any significant value anyway. They released a few of the property, a few films that were done when they bought the company. They've really produced a couple of movies under a few of their banners, but they really haven't utilized anything under Fox. They had Prey and a couple other minor things here or there. But at the end of the day, I see it being more likely of a scenario where they turn around if they needed a big influx of cash of some type to because that's I think kind of where people are buying into this whole Lucasfilm sale business anyways, because they need money quick to buy Hulu. Well, what better? But it's a problem because if you sell Hulu, then what do you need Hulu for since you don't have the Fox properties? So they're kind of in a catch-22 with this whole thing right now.
A Mickey-sized Chinese finger trap. If you could fit one of those Mickey gloves in it.
The one thing that makes sense for them to part with would be Fox, since they haven't really been using it. And they could still sell Fox without Star Wars and hanging on to their Marvel rights. That won't be a problem, most likely. The bigger problem at the end of the day is, what do you sell it for to buy Hulu to not have anything to put on it? Because frankly, outside of that, once you take Fox out of the equation, the only adult stuff they've got left is the Touchstone and Hollywood Pictures stuff, because they sold Miramax and all that stuff years ago, and Dimension. So they don't have any of that stuff to use, and they haven't really been using a lot of Fox. And let's not even get started on the whole controversy about editing and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, I don't see any of these as a win-win for them. Frankly, I see them finding another way to get out of that situation, but selling Fox for them would make sense if somebody else like Sony or Amazon were to take them on and actually utilize them. But let's see what Disney does with them once they have to deal with Hulu. I think that's where we finally start to see a lot of Fox movies show up.
Here's one I've never said. I don't know how tenable it is, but I'm going to put it out there, and we'll see what happens. There's a crazy thing Disney could try, and that would be they could sell ABC. That's a possibility. So,
but would they turn around? Maybe is there a way that they could benefit from maybe splitting it off, kind of like they did with ESPN earlier this year or whatever? Like, would that be more of a possibility?
They need liquid cash, and they probably need something in the range of $20 to $25 billion.
Well, the other possibility is to sell Fox TV, because for those who don't know, it's a very convoluted mess, because when they bought Fox, they could not buy the networks. But they got Fox Studios with it, which basically makes all the TV shows for Fox, but it was considered a separate entity. That's television produced is, under their banner. But if they sold off Fox Television, say back to the Fox network or something like that, that would make sense. Yeah. Right. Because.
But this idea that they're going to be bought out by Apple, people, it's craziness. Well, here's why, Tom. The number of trust issues, the monopoly issues that would arise.
That's the only thing, right?
Yep.
I mean, because at the end of the day, I think that, with enough people, like, there could be a corporate takeover situation here. But again, you're right, like with the regulations and the things. But then again, they've let Amazon and some of these other guys get away with so much stuff that they might be able to argue their way through that one.
I think a shareholder revolt is on the way. We'll see. Again,
because Apple doesn't really have anything else. Yeah, exactly. But Apple doesn't really have anything outside of their studios, themselves. So, and they let Amazon buy MGM. They could use that as an argument that Apple should be able to buy Disney if need be. But frankly, that's a whole other can of worms, because then what do? You've got the parks, you've got the entertainment side of it, you've got the property side of it, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So it's a very cornucopia of things to deal with. And that's why at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think it'll be anything we can think of offhand that they'll use or leverage against because that's the thing. They probably won't sell anything to get Hulu's off the situation taken care of. They'll probably just borrow money on it, but what will they put up for it? That's the question. And
their big issue here,
ESG points, but yeah.
Their big issue here is that they're in a horrible place for taking out those corporate loans, because they're at the highest percentage rate that they've seen in decades, maybe historically high. Well, let's go to this last question.
Some time to push it off and see what happens, but yeah.
Yep. Let's go to this last question. And our members are so intelligent, so prescient in their questions they ask. Appreciate each and every one of them. Stephen, let's toss this to you. Rod Thunderheart wants to know, will Bob Weatherman Iger get tired of Kathleen Kennedy soon?
I'm going to say no on this, because we've heard this story for God knows how long. This has more sequel trilogies than Disney does. It's just the same hypothesis. You know what will happen? If it happens, it happens. Until then, you can't speculate it, because I feel like, God bless his soul, I feel like every time I answer this question, I'm turning into the cult of Mike Zero, and I don't want to be that.
Well, we love Mike Zero for what he does. As we've said before, there's a place for the Wall Street Journal, and there's a place for the Midnight Star. Any of you Weird Al fans out there might get that one, but Mike Zero is definitely more akin to the Midnight Star, and there's a market for that. And we hope that he has all kinds of success with what he does.
Almost
It's a
definitely.
different genre than what we do. Well, folks, I think that's a wrap for us. We've went through your questions. We've talked about Disney and their situation with the box office not looking good at all. It's a situation that I can't imagine they have ever been in before, and probably not many studios have. Disney puts out a ton of content, and it looks like right now every single bit of that content could take a hit, could cost the company money. As we get ready to head out, Tom, where can people find you on this great big beautiful web out there?
Night's Edge After Dark, and just about everywhere else I pop up.
There you go. And Steven, where can we find you?
That's Steven JFG, Rumble, Twitter, YouTube.
Awesome. Well, folks, we did the 20K subscriber celebration yesterday. If you have not yet watched that video, it's on the channel. Go check it out. We had tons of fun. We gave away prizes. We had giveaways. We talked about that Zelda movie. The very first week of this channel, I announced the Zelda movie was in development. The NCU was on the way. 5 months later, the trades have finally caught up to us. We'll see if we can keep staying ahead. All the credit goes to those wonderful sources we have. If you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and stick it to the algorithms by clicking it, the notification bell. The conversation here is over, but it begins for all of you. Drop a comment down below. Tell us what you think about each one of these questions. And who knows, we may just respond to those as well. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Say it ain't so. This just in. Disney lost money on another movie. Why, that can't be. I thought that John Lasseter fella over at Pixar was cranking out the latest hits, and Marvel was unstoppable, and Disney princesses were a thing, and Star Wars was a multi-billion-dollar money-making franchise. I overheard you talking about Disney, and wanted to let you know you're really behind the ball. If you were getting great articles from thatparkplace.com and subscribe to WDW Pro's YouTube channel, you'd actually be ahead of the culture curve and have entertainment explained.